Orion Callahan had no intention of stepping foot in a place with flickering lights and a handwritten chalkboard menu, but hunger and a dead phone battery had a funny way of humbling billionaires. He pushed open the bistro door with a sigh, the bell above it chiming as he stepped inside. The place was tiny, 6 tables, mismatched chairs, and smells that hit him like a warm wave of butter, garlic, and something. Honest. Definitely not the kind of 5-star establishment he was used to. But he was starving, stranded without his driver on this impromptu detour through a coastal town he didn't even know the name of. And the storm outside made walking somewhere else impossible. "Sit wherever you like," a cheerful voice called from behind the counter. He turned toward the source and froze. She was behind the counter in a red apron dusted with flour, tucking a wild curl behind her ear. Her eyes were the color of warm coffee, and her smile, God, her smile wasn't just polite. It was real. Soft, open kind, and it hit him harder than any business deal ever had. Thanks," Orion muttered, sliding into a corner table near the window. He didn't realize he was still staring until she walked over, holding a notepad and pen. "Storm caught you too, huh?" she said, tilting her head. "We're the only place open on this strip when the power goes out. Generator's a lifesaver." He nodded, eyes scanning her name tag. "Rosie," she grinned. "Rosie Hart. I run the place. Chef, server, dishwasher. All in one." "You own this?" he asked, surprised. "Sure do." She handed him a menu, her fingers brushing his. "Don't worry. It's not as fancy as what you're probably used to, but I promise it's good." He blinked. Did she know who he was? Apparently not. Which was oddly refreshing. "I'll take whatever you recommend," he said. Her smile widened. "Brave. I like that." She walked off, and he watched her disappear through the kitchen doors. The storm outside rattled against the windows, but inside, Orion felt something unfamiliar: warmth, comfort, human connection. It was the first time in months he wasn't thinking about boardrooms, IPOs, or the ever-growing pile of contracts waiting in his penthouse office. When Rosie returned with a bowl of creamy pasta and fresh bread, she set it down with a proud little nod. "Made it myself. Be honest, if it's terrible, I'll only cry for like 5 minutes. He laughed, surprising even himself. "Deal." He took a bite and then another. It was rich, simple, and perfect. "You weren't kidding," he said. "This is incredible." She leaned her hip against the table, arms crossed. "Told you." They talked while he ate. About the bistro. About how she'd inherited it from her grandmother and had been keeping it alive with nothing but stubbornness and good food. She didn't ask about his job. She didn't check her phone. She just talked like a real person. And Orion listened. Really listened. For the first time in years, someone wasn't trying to impress him. She wasn't faking anything. And it made her the most interesting woman he'd met in a long time. By the time he finished eating, the storm had died down. But he didn't want to leave. "Can I at least pay you for the meal?" he asked as she cleared his plate. She waved him off. "You were stranded. It's on the house." He reached into his coat and pulled out a thick black card, placing it on the table anyway. Her eyes widened. "That's a Centurion card." He leaned back slowly. "Yeah. So you're..." She looked from the card to him, realizing what she'd missed earlier. "You're someone important. I'm just a guy who needed a meal." He stood, slipping on his coat. "But thank you, Rosie. For the food. And for not knowing who I was." She tilted her head. "You're welcome, mister." "Orion," he said. "Orion Callahan." Her eyebrows lifted, and he saw the recognition hit. But she didn't treat him any differently. She just smiled again. That same warm, honest smile that had completely scrambled his brain. "Well, Orion Callahan," she said softly. "You're welcome here any time." He stepped outside, the rain now just a drizzle, and looked back once. She was standing at the window watching him. When their eyes met, she waved, and something in his chest shifted. He didn't know why, but he smiled back. 3 days later, he came back. This time, he wasn't stranded. This time, he drove himself in a sleek black Aston Martin that barely fit down the narrow street. He wore no suit, no watch, just jeans and a plain shirt. And when he walked into the bistro, Rosie looked up from the counter, her eyes lighting up like she'd been hoping he would. "You're back," she said. "Yeah," he said. "I figured I owed you another 5 minutes of crying in case the food's worse this time." She laughed. "You're ridiculous." He sat at the same table. And just like that, it became a thing. He came back. Again. And again. Every couple days, then every day. And Rosie never asked about his life outside the bistro. She just got to know him. The real him. Not the billionaire. Not the CEO. Just Orion. He watched her cook. Helped her wipe down tables. Sometimes they sat after closing and shared a bottle of wine while music played low in the background. The way her eyes crinkled when she laughed. The way she always put extra garlic in his food because he liked it. The way she never tried to impress him because she didn't need to. He didn't realize how deep it had gotten until one night, after a long laugh over something dumb, she looked at him and said, "You're not what I expected." "Is that a good thing?" he asked. She nodded slowly, her fingers brushing his across the table. "Yeah, it really is." And just like that, it was there. The moment. The shift. His hand closed over hers, and the smile she gave him then, it was the same one as the first night, but deeper now. Like it wasn't just warmth. It was something more. Something real. And Orion knew. He was falling fast, hard, and completely for the local chef with flour on her apron and fire in her heart. And he had no idea what the hell he was going to do about it. Rosie was balancing 3 plates on her arm when the front door opened with a gust of wind and the low hum of a luxury engine outside. She didn't need to look up to know who it was. Only one man came into her bistro with the scent of expensive cologne and eyes that held too much history for someone his age. "You're late," she said, nudging open the kitchen door with her hip and sliding the plates onto the pass. "I saved you the last peach tart. Don't make me regret it." "I got pulled into something," Orion said, hanging his coat on the peg near the door, "but I drove 30 miles in the rain for that tart, so I hope it's worth it." Rosie arched an eyebrow. "Are you saying my tart has competition?" "I'm saying your tart is the only thing I've looked forward to all day." He didn't say it as a line. There wasn't even a hint of charm in his voice. Just weariness. The kind that clung to his shoulders and dulled the usual sharpness in his gaze. She poured 2 cups of decaf and brought them over. "Sit. I'll warm it up." Orion looked around the bistro. It was just past closing, the chairs flipped on tables and the lights dimmed except for the sconces along the back wall. Everything smelled of cinnamon and citrus. It felt like a place time forgot. Rosie returned with the tart on a plate, steam curling from the crust. She set it in front of him and slid into the seat across the table. "Talk," she said, folding her arms on the table. "You've got that look." He picked up a fork and stared at the dessert without touching it. "I lost a deal today. A big one. First time in years." "You don't seem angry." "I'm not." He looked up. "That's the problem." She waited. "I should care. The merger was worth more than most people make in 10 lifetimes," he said. "But when the board pulled out, I felt nothing. Just relief." Rosie leaned back. "So maybe it wasn't the right thing. It was the logical thing. Profitable. Clean. But not right. That's a difference people forget to pay attention to." He took a bite of the tart, chewing slowly. Then he looked at her, something quiet settling behind his eyes. "When you wake up in the morning, do you ever wonder if you're supposed to be doing something else?" "Every morning," she said without hesitation. "Then I remember I'm not great at anything except this. And I'm okay with that." "Why?" "Because this place makes me feel like I matter. Not in a flashy, headline-worthy way. Just in a way that's enough." He stared at her for a long moment, then set down his fork. "I envy that." She tilted her head. "You're the last person I expected to hear that from. Everyone wants something from me. My money, my name, my network. I can't remember the last time someone looked at me and didn't see $signs. Rosie was quiet for a beat, then said, "I don't care about your money." "I know," he said. That's exactly why I keep coming back. They sat in silence, the only sound the rain tapping against the windows. Rosie reached for her coffee, taking a slow sip. I don't know how to explain this, Orion said suddenly, but when I'm here, eating your food, listening to you ramble about recipes and supply deliveries, I feel more like myself than I do in my own penthouse. Rosie's brow furrowed. That doesn't sound like a compliment to your penthouse. It isn't. She laughed and he smiled faintly. Not the kind of smile he gave in boardrooms. This one was unguarded. Honest. I was supposed to fly to London this weekend, he said. But I canceled. Why? I didn't want to miss Sunday brunch. Rosie blinked. You canceled an international trip. For pancakes. You make them with lemon zest and vanilla bean, he said. They ruin every other pancake I've ever had. She tried to hide the flush creeping up her neck by standing. I'll clean up the back. You can finish your tart. As she turned, he said I wasn't lying. She paused mid-step. About any of it, he added. I don't know what this is between us, but I haven't felt it before. Not like this. Rosie stood there, one hand on the counter's edge. I'm not used to this, Orion. Neither am I. She turned enough to meet his eyes. Then maybe we just keep it simple. You come in, I feed you, we talk. No expectations. I can do that, he said. As long as you promise Sunday brunch. Fine, she said, walking toward the kitchen. But next time, you're helping with dishes. The next morning, Orion didn't go into the office. Instead, he drove out of the city and walked the beach near town. The air was sharp and clean, and he stood at the shoreline, his shoes forgotten in the back seat of his car. He couldn't stop thinking about her. About how her voice stayed in his head even in the silence. About how she never asked him to be anyone but himself. And about how terrifying that was. Because for the first time in his entire life, Orion Callahan wasn't in control of what came next. Orion stood at the edge of the bistro's kitchen, sleeves rolled up, a dish towel tossed over his shoulder, and a stainless steel pot in his hand. He looked absurdly out of place, and Rosie didn't hide her amusement as she watched him scrutinize the industrial sink like it was a corporate acquisition gone wrong. That's not a stock portfolio, she said, drying a plate with a flick of the wrist. Just soap and water. I'm aware, he muttered, holding the pot like it was radioactive. I just haven't done this in a while. How long is a while? Since prep school. Rosie laughed, but it wasn't mocking. It was delighted, like someone discovering a hidden room in a house they thought they knew. She took the pot from him and dunked it into the sink, bubbles rising as she scrubbed. You're hopeless, she said. I'm trying, he said, watching her hands move with practiced ease. Not everyone can wield a sponge with that much authority. Rosie passed him a towel. Dry. He did as instructed, quietly, his eyes lingering on the way her brow crinkled when she concentrated. The kitchen was warm, the overhead lights humming softly, and outside the windows, the sky had dimmed to a bruised violet. He felt like he'd stepped out of his life and into someone else's, and he didn't want to leave. You didn't come by yesterday, she said, not looking up. I had to fly to Boston. Emergency board meeting. Everything all right? It's fine now. But it made me realize something. She glanced at him, curious. What's that? I don't want my entire life to be crisis management. Rosie rinsed her hands and leaned against the counter, drying them on a faded dish towel. Then change it. It's not that simple. It is, she said. You either keep going how you've been going or you stop. People make it complicated because they're scared. He considered that. And you're not scared? Of course I am, she said. But I'm more scared of waking up in 10 years and realizing I've been living someone else's idea of my life. Orion folded the towel in his hands. You always know exactly what to say. No, Rosie said, shaking her head. I just say the truth. Most people don't like it. I do. She looked at him then, really looked, and something in her expression shifted. She walked toward him, slow and measured until they were standing only inches apart. The air between them thickened, the kitchen's warmth suddenly heavy. I don't know what this is, she said, searching his face. But it's starting to matter to me. It already matters to me, he said. She nodded slightly, then turned away, grabbing her coat from the hook by the door. Come with me. Where? Just come. They stepped outside into the cool night. Rosie led him down the street, past shuttered shops and sleeping houses, until they reached a narrow path that opened onto a rocky bluff. The sea stretched out before them, dark and endless, the waves crashing below. My grandmother used to bring me here, she said. Said the ocean was her reset button. When things got too loud, she came here to remember what mattered. Orion stood beside her, the wind tugging at his sleeves. What matters to you? She was quiet for a moment. People. Real ones. Moments that don't need filters or headlines. And peace. I fought hard for mine. He turned to her. I don't have that. Peace. You could. I wouldn't know where to start. Rosie looked at him, her voice soft. You already did. The first night you walked into my bistro. He reached for her hand then, not hesitantly, but like it was the most natural thing in the world. Her fingers curled into his, grounding him. For a long while, they stood in silence, the wind cold, the stars sharp above them. Then she said, there's something you should know. He braced himself, unsure why the weight in her voice made his pulse tick faster. The bistro's in trouble, she said. I didn't tell you because I didn't want it to be a charity case. But the truth is, I've been hanging on by a thread. He didn't let go of her hand. How bad? That enough that I might have to close in a few months if something doesn't change. He turned toward her fully. Why didn't you tell me sooner? Because I didn't want you to throw money at it just to fix it. I wanted to earn your respect before your help. Orion exhaled slowly, the weight of her pride settling between them. I'm not interested in saving it for you. But I might be interested in investing if you'll let me help on your terms. Her eyes flicked toward him. You'd really do that? I'd do a lot more than that, he said. But only if it's what you want. She looked down at their joined hands, then back at the sea. Let me think about it. I can wait. They stayed there until the breeze turned cold enough to chase them back. He drove her home, not to the bistro, but to a small cottage tucked behind a row of trees, where twinkle lights framed the porch and a cat watched from the windowsill like a sentry. She paused before getting out, her hand lingering on the door handle. You're not what I expected either, she said. Is that a good thing? Rosie smiled, not warmly this time, but with something deeper. It might be the best thing. Then she left him sitting in the car, headlights casting gold across the gravel, heart pounding with the quiet certainty that something irreversible had just shifted. And for once, Orion didn't try to analyze it. He just knew. He was already in too deep and he didn't want out. Rosie stepped through the bistro's rear entrance, her arms full of crates from the morning farmer's market. The scent of early spring herbs clung to her sleeves, and her hair was still damp from the mist outside. She dropped the crates onto the prep counter and stopped short. Orion was already there. He was standing near the walk-in cooler, sleeves rolled up, sorting through a box of heirloom tomatoes like he knew what he was doing. He didn't. Is there a reason you're manhandling my produce like you're trying to negotiate with it? She asked, brushing past him to rinse her hands. I was trying to help, he replied, holding up a tomato. This one looked suspicious, possibly criminal. Rosie tossed him a pair of gloves. You're not allowed to ban vegetables, especially not the ones I paid a fortune for. I take it back, he said, slipping on the gloves. This one's innocent, probably just misunderstood. She rolled her eyes but couldn't stop the grin tugging at the corner of her mouth. You're here early. I couldn't sleep. She paused, drying her hands. Bad night. Thinking too much. He set the tomato down carefully. I've been going through the numbers for the bistro. Rosie straightened. I didn't send you those. You didn't need to. I had a copy of the lease agreement from the county database and your supplier invoices were in the trash last time I helped close. I may have peeked. You went through my garbage? Technically, I carried the bag out and noticed a few pages stuck to the side. It wasn't intentional. But once I saw the margins, he trailed off. Rosie crossed her arms. And? You're one event away from turning things around. She raised an eyebrow. You get that from a tomato? No. I got that from doing a full analysis on your revenue streams and cost structure. If you had a weekend event, something with a prefixed menu, maybe live music, you could triple your traffic. Maybe more. Rosie blinked. That's actually not a bad idea. I know, he said. I already booked the permits. She opened her mouth and then closed it again. You did what? There's a street fair this Saturday. I submitted your name for a pop-up tasting booth. I also hired a jazz trio and rented out the lot behind the bistro for overflow seating. You'll need staff, so I made a few calls. Culinary students from the institute downtown are coming to help. She stared at him. You hijacked my restaurant. I optimized your opportunity. That's not better. He stepped closer. I know it's forward, but I also know how much this place means to you. I didn't want to sit on the sidelines when I could actually do something. Rosie opened a drawer and pulled out a clean apron, tossing it at him. Then you're on dish duty all day. He caught it midair. Fair. Saturday came faster than either of them expected. The street outside the bistro was strung with lights, borrowed from a nearby event company Orion had quietly paid for in full. The smell of rosemary focaccia and lemon roasted chicken drifted from the open windows. People lined up before the booth had even opened. Rosie moved through the makeshift outdoor kitchen with practiced precision, her hair pulled back beneath a red scarf, her hands never still for more than a second. Orion stood nearby, sleeves rolled, plating samples with a speed that surprised even him. You're scaring me, Rosie said as he garnished yet another tray with edible flowers. Are you secretly a caterer? I was a kitchen intern in college. My father made me work every summer. Said I'd never understand business if I didn't understand labor. She paused, surprised. You never told me that. I don't talk about him much. Rosie wiped her hands on her apron. Tell me now. Orion hesitated before nodding. He wanted me to be ruthless, efficient, unemotional. He built an empire but lost every relationship he had along the way. I used to think he was right. And now, I'm not sure anymore. Rosie held his gaze. You're not him. No, Orion said, voice low. But I worry I've been living like I am. She reached out, her fingers brushing his wrist. Then stop. He didn't answer. He didn't need to. As the sun dipped behind the buildings, the makeshift dining area filled with laughter, music, and clinking glasses. Rosie stood on a table, frying pan in hand, and called out the last dish of the night like it was a battle cry. Applause followed. Someone handed her a glass of wine. Someone called her a genius. She laughed until her eyes watered. Orion watched her from a few feet away, arms crossed, heart thudding like it was trying to tell him something he'd been ignoring for far too long. Later, when the last table was cleared and the jazz trio packed up their instruments, Rosie and Orion sat on the curb outside the bistro, shoes kicked off, plates of leftover food balanced on their knees. Do you think it worked? She asked, staring at the string lights still glowing above them. You had a wait list 30 names long, he said. You created something unforgettable tonight. She leaned her head lightly against his shoulder. I couldn't have done it without you. You could have, he said. But I'm glad you didn't have to. They sat in silence for a long stretch, the kind of silence that felt earned. Then Orion said, I've been thinking about what you said before, about not living someone else's life. Rosie looked up. I put in my resignation this morning. She straightened. You, what? I'm selling my stake in the firm. I already started the paperwork. I'm done. She blinked. That's everything you've built. No, he said quietly. That was everything I inherited. What I built is still ahead of me. Rosie set her plate down. Are you sure? I've never been more certain. He turned to face her fully. I don't want boardrooms. I want this. I want you. She didn't speak, just stared at him, her expression unreadable. I love you, he said. Still, she said nothing. Orion's heart twisted. Rosie. Then, she kissed him. Not gently, not cautiously, but with both hands in his hair and a ferocity that sent every coherent thought scattering like flour in a gust of wind. When they pulled apart, breathless, she whispered, "You better be serious. I've never been anything else." She smiled then, eyes shining, and leaned her forehead against his. "I warned you," she said. "I'm not easy." "I'm not looking for easy," he said. "I'm looking for real." They sat there until the lights above them flickered off one by one, until the town quieted to a hush, until both of them knew without a single doubt that whatever came next, they'd be facing it together. And in the distance, the bistro stood behind them, doors closed, windows glowing, ready for its next beginning. Just like them. Rosie stood barefoot in the middle of the bistro's dining room, sunlight pooling across the checkered tiles like warm honey. The place had never looked more alive. Not because of the fresh paint on the walls or the polished oak trim that Orion had insisted on repairing himself, but because of the laughter echoing from the back patio and the long line already forming outside the front door. She glanced over her shoulder and caught sight of him through the kitchen pass window, his sleeves rolled up, a streak of flour across his jaw, and a tray of crostini balanced on one hand like he was born doing it. He caught her looking and raised a brow. "You're staring. You're sweating." He stepped through the swinging door and leaned close. "You're glowing. Don't try to distract me. Did you double-check the wine delivery?" "Handled. And the staff schedule is posted. We're overstaffed by 2, but considering your tendency to charm every person who walks in the door, I figured we'd need the backup." "You're not wrong," she said, adjusting the fresh flowers in the vase by the register. "Though I'm not the one who convinced the mayor's wife to bring her book club here. I just told her the food might change her life." Rosie turned to face him fully. "This is real, isn't it? You mean the full reservation book? The waiting list stretching into next month? Or the fact that we now have a dessert named after your cat?" She laughed. "All of it. Very real," he said. "And still just the beginning." They didn't need to say what they both knew. That the bistro had gone from local secret to must-visit destination in under 2 months. That Rosie's recipes were now being featured in culinary magazines. That freelance food writers were quietly slipping through the door, jotting notes between bites of her lemon thyme chicken. And that Orion had turned down 3 acquisition offers for the newly trademarked Heart and Hearth brand. Instead, Rosie reached for his hand and squeezed it, the gesture quiet but full of everything unspoken. "Come with me," he said, tugging her gently toward the back. "Now, I want to show you something." She followed him through the kitchen, past the walk-in cooler and out the back door. The alley had been transformed. Gone were the delivery crates and clutter. In their place stood a narrow stone path, flanked by potted citrus trees and hanging ivy. At the end of the path was a new door, rich mahogany with a brass handle. "What is this?" she asked, heart thudding. Orion unlocked the door and stepped aside. Inside, warm light spilled across an intimate space, a tasting room, no more than 12 seats, with a private bar and a glass ceiling that let in the sky. The walls were lined with shelves of curated wines and handwritten menus. It was cozy, elegant, and unmistakably hers. "You always said you wanted a place where people could feel at home and still be surprised," he said. "This is your surprise." Her chest tightened. "You built this. With your blueprints. I found them in that old folder under your counter. You drew this when you were 21. I never thought I'd get to see it. You're seeing it now." Rosie stepped inside, her fingers trailing the edge of the counter, her voice thick. "It's perfect. I thought we could call it Heart's Table. Just for private dinners. Your recipes, your stories. No menus, just what you want to cook that day." She turned to him, overwhelmed. "You remembered everything. I remember everything about you." She didn't answer. Just crossed the space and kissed him, soft and certain, like the weight of the moment had finally settled in her bones. When they pulled apart, she whispered, "I love you." "I know," he said, brushing a curl from her cheek. "I've known from the moment you told me my tart was dry." "I never said that." "You thought it." Rosie laughed and pressed her forehead to his. "We're really doing this, aren't we?" "We are." Outside, the bistro bell rang as the front doors opened for the evening crowd. Inside the new tasting room, Rosie took one last look around and then reached for Orion's hand again. "Let's go feed some people." 3 months later, the bistro hosted its first wedding. The invitation list was small, just 40 guests, but the celebration stretched well into the night. Lanterns hung from the trees above the patio, casting golden light over tables piled with dishes Rosie had insisted on cooking herself. Orion had argued. She'd won. She wore a simple ivory dress, her hair pinned with sprigs of rosemary. He wore a tailored navy suit with his sleeves rolled up by the time dessert was served. They danced barefoot on the stone patio, twirling under the stars while the jazz trio played the same melody from the night of their first event. At one point, Rosie stood at the edge of the patio, staring up at the string lights. Orion came up behind her, wrapping his arms around her waist. "What are you thinking? That I wish my grandmother could see this. She would have cried. She would have made you peel potatoes for 3 weeks first. I would have deserved it." Rosie leaned back against him. "I never imagined this. Not even once. Then I'm glad I did," he said. Later that night, after the last guest had gone and the final glass had been washed, they sat on the roof above the bistro, legs dangling over the edge. Below them, the town was quiet. Above, the stars blinked like scattered confetti. "I want to open another location," Rosie said suddenly. Orion turned his head. "Really? Not a second bistro? Something different? A teaching kitchen? For kids who don't think they belong anywhere?" He smiled. "You already have a name in mind. Heart and Start." "You're brilliant," he said. "You're patient," she replied. "We make a good team." "Yes," Orion said. "We do." They sat in silence for a while after that, not because there was nothing left to say, but because the stillness between them had become its own kind of language. When they finally climbed down and stepped back inside the bistro, Rosie paused by the front door, fingers brushing the edge of the old chalkboard menu. She picked up a piece of chalk and scratched a line across the bottom with a flourish. "Closed for a private celebration," she wrote. Orion wrapped an arm around her shoulders. "Ours, ours," she said, smiling up at him. Outside, the wind shifted gently, carrying the scent of fresh basil and lemon through the air. Inside, the lights dimmed, the door clicked shut, and their bistro stood at peace. They didn't need anything more. They had love, laughter, and a life hand-built from flour, fire, and faith. And it was exactly enough.